everybody, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 6 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host, Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches in Lucha Underground history with match number 45 on our list, which is the Grave Consequences match between Mil Muertes and Prince Puma from the November 9th, 2016 edition of Lucha Underground entitled Ready for War. Grave Consequences is, like Aztec Warfare, the real big gimmick match that we saw come to fruition through Lucha Underground. It's basically just a casket match, but they upped the level to which we would know a casket match could reach. You're used to Undertaker casket matches, that's kind of his gimmick. But I'm going to say it, there's never really been a great casket match, right? There's been little moments in them, but there's never been one that's truly great. They're often kind of slow, plodding matches built, around, guys trying to stuff the other guy in the casket and, guys preventing the lid from closing, right? So, there's only so much you can get out of a match like that. Lucha Underground brought in the casket match stipulation with the first Grave Consequences match between Mil Muertes and Phoenix. It blew everybody away. It was brutal, it was bloody, and like I said, it reinvented the expectations we could have on a match such as that. Grave Consequences is something that was used in every season of Lucha Underground. Today's match that we're going to discuss was from Season 3. Up until this point, Mil Muertes had, competed in all 4 Grave Consequences match. Like The Undertaker, it was his signature stipulation match, but leading into Grave Consequences 3, he had never won one. He lost to Phoenix in the first, he lost to Matanza in the second, and coming into this third one with Prince Puma, would his luck turn around? Our story here, and we'll talk more about this, throughout this season of the show, but Mil Muertes and Prince Puma would engage in a feud at the end of Season 1 around the Lucha Underground title that would ultimately see Mil win the belt from Puma at Ultima Lucha 1. On our way to that, though, there was an angle where Conan, who had been managing Prince Puma, was killed by Mil Muertes and stuffed in the casket. So, although they didn't do Grave Consequences at that point in the feud, here we are, a season and a half later, kind of finally getting, this, I won't call it a blow-off because they'll continue their feud, but, kind of what at the time seemed like the blow-off to that whole angle with Conan. So Prince Puma, he was the face of Lucha Underground. He was played by Ricochet, who was the perfect guy to be utilized in Lucha Underground because he's so athletic, so good, and, where I'd argue, maybe his charisma and, microphone skills were never super high, putting him under that mask, having Conan as his mouthpiece initially, it really worked for him, and he was a great star for the company. He was the first Lucha Underground champion, and ultimately, he ended up getting out of his contract at the end of Season 3 and moving on to the WWE, but, his time in Lucha Underground was really valued. So, Mil Muertes, we've talked about, he was, another big face of the company, kind of one of their top heels. So we get, this rekindling of the rivalry in Season 3. Katrina, who was managing Mil Muertes, basically gives him an ultimatum saying, twice you lost Grave Consequences. And in the Lucha Underground universe, losing Grave Consequences means that you die. She's resurrected him twice, the first time intentionally, the second time because she had to. And she basically says, this is it. You lose this match, I'm not bringing you back to life. So a lot at stake for Mil. The casket, so Grave Consequences visually is an incredible match. They have, all of these Day of the Dead-esque, skeleton, druids that bring out the caskets, and there's skeleton men on stilts and things like that. It's all very creepy and cool. There's, flower arrangements that are used as weapons. It's a really great vibe. The caskets themselves for this match are great because they're actually decorated with painting that show half of Prince Puma's mask and half of Mil Muertes' mask. So again, just really visually impressive. Because this match is a grudge match, they really do give off that vibe for it. These guys have fantastic chemistry. So Mil Muertes, I've talked about him at length a little bit. Ricky Banderas, I don't want to say he's a limited worker, but he's a big kind of powerhouse guy. But he works so well with the quick, wrestlers. And Thankfully, he was really given the opportunity to do that in Lucha Underground, which, in my opinion, made him the ultimate VIP of all, or MVP, I should say, not VIP, the MVP of all 4 seasons. Although, Pentagon and Phoenix were kind of the stars that came out, of Lucha Underground, Puma at the time was kind of the face. Mil Muertes was that consistent person throughout the entire 4-season run that just delivered time and time and time again. And it really helped revitalize the career of someone that, at least to North American fans, wasn't really well known. But like I said, we got a grudge match here. Puma jumps Mil during his entrance, kicks him down the big stairs in the Lucha Underground temple, and hits just a crazy dive over the railing onto him. He tries to keep that quick clip. He knows he's undermatched. Even though Mil hasn't won a Grave Consequences, it is his signature match. So Puma knows that he's fighting from behind, not just from the size disparity, but also from that experience in this type of match. And he makes mistakes. So he goes for another dive after the first one worked, but he gets caught, kind of power slammed on the floor, thrown through the chairs that we've talked about, the wooden chairs, that's a big spot in a lot of Lucha Underground matches. He gets thrown through a door into like a storage area. It looked great. He gets power bombed onto the casket. So that's the other thing that, in a WWE casket match, you really don't see the casket used much. And that's where Lucha Underground just completely blew the doors, off that match, the door off the casket, if you will, by incorporating it as a weapon. We get it brought into the ring, which, has been traditional throughout all of the Grave Consequences matches. Here's no different. Mil, takes off the bottom rope, slides the casket in. We get a 450 from Ricochet while Mil is lying on the casket, which looked awesome. There's a great spot where he sandwiches Mil's head in between the casket lid, and it hits it with a chair, like almost giving it a concerto, which is cool. Mil is just a juggernaut in this match as well. There's a great spot where he goes for his signature spear, misses it, and hits head first into a chair in the corner. Puma kind of does the whole like, ooh, I got out of that, but turns around. It's basically no-sold, and Mil just spears him right through a table. Again, just showing, how tough and how menacing he is. We talk about Ricochet making mistakes, though. And he does that here. So he avoids Mil's finisher, the flatliner, by doing like a handstand out of it. He gets some kicks and things like that. He goes for a big tope, but gets hit with a forearm. But ultimately, the biggest mistake that he makes is he sets up some tables on the floor. He takes a really long time setting up these tables, and that allows Mil to come back with a big spinning chokeslam onto the casket. Puma still somehow manages to keep going and keep fighting. He slips out of a fireman's carry, hits a bunch of kicks, hits a bunch of chair shots, springs off the ring apron and hits like a Van Daminator, and he lays Mil across the tables and goes up top. So, we're thinking maybe 630 through it, shooting star press, whatever, Prince Puma decides he's going to bust out. But again, Mil just will not say die. He gets up and he proceeds to hit the spinning chokeslam on Prince Puma from the top rope, off the ring apron, through both tables on the floor, and that ends up being all she wrote. One more flatliner, which is Mil's kind of big finishing move that puts everybody down in the ring, and he proceeds to put Prince Puma in the casket to finish the match. At this point in Lucha Underground, we had Vampiro, who had sort of been trying to court Prince Puma after his relationship with Pentagon Jr. went south at the end of Ultima Lucha 2, which we talked about the other day, where Pentagon, attacks him with the barbed wire baseball bat. This kind of led to Puma finally getting on Vampiro's side, because we find out it was Vampiro using very dark magic to resurrect Prince Puma from his grave. Puma would finally, consider Vampiro his master, and this would all lead to Ultima Lucha 3, where Prince Puma would end up being double-crossed by Vampiro. That would ultimately lead to Pentagon Jr. once again joining his master, Vampiro, and becoming the Lucha Underground champion for the first time. But more on that in another episode, I'm sure. This match is great, though. It's super fun. Although it won't be the only grave consequences match we see on this list, so there's some spoilers for you now. It is a great introductory one if you do decide to watch these matches in countdown order. Lucha Underground, Google it. You can find it online. It might be available on the Tubi app. I'm not sure if it's still on there, but it was available through iTunes, and worst comes to worst, you can find it on Dailymotion and some other streaming sites. You can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube so that you don't miss a video. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50, and please join me again tomorrow as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50. Top 50.